It begins inside a small, windowless room, the kind of place where the air feels heavier than it should. A metal table sits at the center, its surface cold, reflective, and perfectly clean. One camera records in the corner, the kind with no emotion, no sympathy, just an unblinking eye. Across from the table, two detectives sit quietly. One flips through a thin file. The other stares at the clock, waiting. The hum of the fluorescent light fills the silence, every flicker echoing like a heartbeat. Then the door opens. A young man steps in, escorted by an officer. He's calm, too calm. His clothes are neat, his posture relaxed. There's no handcuff, no resistance. He moves like he's walked into a job interview, not an interrogation. He sits, folds his hands, smiles. For a moment, the detectives don't say a word. They just watch him, and he watches back. What strikes everyone who later sees this footage is the stillness. There's no fear in his eyes, no tension in his jaw, just quiet confidence. When Detective Harris finally speaks, his voice is measured. "You know why you're here?" The man tilts his head slightly, like he's thinking. "You think I did something," he replies, almost amused. Harris opens a folder. "We just want to understand what happened last night." A small shrug. "Nothing happened." The man says, "The exchange seemed simple, polite even. But the longer it goes, the stranger it feels." The man doesn't fidget. He doesn't look away. He answers every question with the same unsettling calm, his tone never rising, his smile never fading. When the detectives mention inconsistencies, locations, timelines, witnesses, he simply nods, as if he expected it. Then he says something that sends a chill through the room. "You've already decided what you want to believe." It's not defiance, it's certainty. The detective leans forward. "Then tell us what really happened." The man looks at the camera, directly into it. For the first time, his expression doesn't change. But something in his eyes shifts, as if acknowledging the unseen audience watching through the lens. In that moment, the air changes. The confidence feels less like innocence and more like control. He knows exactly what he's doing. What unfolds over the next 2 hours would later be called one of the most psychologically chilling interrogations ever captured on film. Not because of what was said, but because of how little needed to be said. Every pause, every glance, every silence becomes part of the story. And by the end of it, the detectives realize something terrifying. They're not the ones in control of this interrogation. The man across the table is. The camera timestamp shows 10:47 a.m. The air inside the interrogation room hasn't moved. It's as if the oxygen itself is frozen, suspended between truth and manipulation. Detective Harris leans back in his chair. His partner, Detective Monroe, takes the lead now. Monroe's tone is sharper, more direct. He's dealt with hundreds of suspects. But something about this man feels different. Not dangerous, but deliberate. "Let's start again," Monroe says, sliding a photo across the table. "You were seen here, right?" The man glances down, barely a second, then looks up. "I was nearby. That's not a crime." His calmness borders on rehearsed. His words sound clean, measured, like he's thought about them long before this moment. It's not arrogance, it's control. For every question asked, he gives a half answer. Enough to sound cooperative, but never enough to move the investigation forward. He keeps the rhythm of the conversation slow, forcing the detectives to adjust his pace. Psychologists later reviewing the footage described it as a masterclass in subtle dominance, how silence, body language, and precision can turn an interrogation inside out. At 11:13 a.m., Detective Monroe tries to change tactics. He starts talking, casually, conversationally, about work, about life, about the weather outside. Most suspects break down when they realize the detectives aren't playing the good cop, bad cop game. But this man doesn't break. He engages. He laughs lightly. He even asks Monroe questions back about his family, about the case, about the way police work really functions. It's unsettling, because in that moment, the balance shifts again. Monroe realizes that the suspect isn't defending himself anymore. He's interviewing them. Harris interjects, pushing a new set of photos across the table. "We have witnesses," he says flatly. The man studies them, his face expressionless. "People say a lot of things," he replies. "Memory's unreliable." The detectives exchange a glance. This wasn't denial, it was deflection, the kind used by people who understand psychology on a deep, instinctual level. At 11:28 a.m., the man folds his arms and leans forward slightly. His voice drops lower. "You're not really looking for the truth," he says. "You're looking for something that feels like it." The words hang in the air. For a moment, neither detective speaks. Harris closes the folder, visibly frustrated. Monroe just watches, analyzing. There's a strange paradox about the man across the table. He's completely at ease in an environment designed to break people. Every sound, the ticking clock, the hum of the air vent, the camera's lower, seems to obey his rhythm. By noon, the room feels smaller. Monroe tries one last approach. "You know," he says softly, "I've seen people try to control the narrative before. It never ends well." The man smiles, the same calm, practiced smile from the moment he walked in. "I'm not controlling anything," he says. "I'm just not giving you what you expect." That single line would later become infamous, quoted, analyzed, dissected by behavioral experts and interrogation specialists for years. Because in that moment, everyone watching realized he wasn't resisting the investigation. He was rewriting it. The session ended with more questions and answers. But one thing was certain. This interrogation had stopped being about guilt or innocence. It had become a psychological chess match between truth and perception. And as the detective prepared to bring him back the next morning, one of them whispered quietly to the other, "Tomorrow, we need to figure out who's interrogating who." The next morning, the detectives returned to the same room. Same table, same camera, same man. But this time, the atmosphere felt different, heavier, charged. The suspect sat calmly, hands folded just as before. He smiled politely when the detectives entered, as if greeting old friends. For the officers observing from behind glass, it felt like déjà vu. The same scene repeating itself, but with a growing sense that something beneath the surface had changed. Detective Monroe started the recording. His voice was steady. "This is a continuation of the interview with..." The suspect interrupted him softly. "You don't need to introduce me. They already know who I am." It wasn't arrogance. It was precision. He knew the cameras were rolling, that every word mattered. Harris leaned forward. "You told us yesterday that you weren't at the scene, but we've got new information. We got video." The man blinked once, slow and deliberate. "Show me." They didn't show him, not yet. Instead, Monroe slid an evidence photo across the table. The suspect glanced at it for half a second, and then, for the first time, exhaled. Just a small sigh, but it was enough. It was the first real crack in his composure. "You look tired," Monroe said. "You've been holding up this wall for 2 days. You can stop now." The man chuckled quietly. "Tired?" He leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on the ceiling. "You think this is hard for me?" Detective Harris watched him closely, noting the twitch in his jaw, the way his fingers tapped rhythmically against the table. The first signs of tension. "Then what's the truth?" Harris asked. The man looked down, and for the first time, his tone softened. "Truth," he repeated. "Truth is what survives the story." He looked straight into the camera again, the same unflinching stare from the day before, and said, "You want a confession, but not the truth. You want something that makes sense, something you can write down and close." The detective stayed silent. The suspect smiled faintly. "But what if the truth doesn't fit your story?" It was a haunting question, not shouted, not defensive, just quiet, honest, and unnervingly self-aware. At 10:15 a.m., Monroe made one last attempt. "You can help yourself. You can help everyone involved. Just tell us what really happened." The man turned toward him slowly. "I already did," he said. "You just didn't believe it." He leaned back again, closed his eyes for a moment, and whispered, "That's the thing about truth. It doesn't need to convince anyone to exist." The room fell silent. A few minutes later, the interview ended. The detectives walked out, unsure if they had gained anything or lost everything. The suspect was escorted away, his expression unchanged. When the footage was later reviewed by experts in behavioral psychology, they agreed on one thing. This was an interrogation. It was a performance, a rare, unnerving display of control by someone who understood human behavior so well that he turned an entire investigation into an experiment. Even now, years later, clips from that footage circulate online, analyzed frame by frame. Viewers say it feels like watching a man who already knew how the story would end, who understood that words could be more powerful than any evidence. In the end, he never confessed, he never broke, but what makes this interrogation so chilling isn't what he said. It's that even when the detectives left, it felt like he was the one who had been watching them. And as the recording ends, with the camera still running and the room empty, the sound that lingers isn't his voice, it's the silence he left behind.